Well, it is 6:31. While we wait for Amos, why don't I at least read us in? Welcome to the June 9th, 2025 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board. This is, as you can tell, a meeting that's going to be conducted entirely remotely, and it may still be broadcast live and recorded on ECAT. To use Zoom, you'll need to use the link on the agenda or download the Zoom application. You'll need the webinar ID to join by phone only. While conducting remote meetings, we will endeavor to keep meeting operations as close to standard procedures as possible. However, use of the remote platform will necessitate some additional meeting protocols. Number one, while board members or commissioners and applicants will be on video and audio, invited to speak by the chair, public participants joining by Zoom will be muted and with no video feed from them. Public lines will be muted throughout the meeting to allow the board to conduct business. For general meetings, not hearings, and only for items under which the chair solicits public comment, members of the public participating in the Zoom meeting may submit a written question via text, provided they include their full name and address for the public record. Members of the public viewing the meeting on ECAT may also submit questions in writing via email to dped@easton.ma.us. The chair reserves the right to respond to questions during the live meeting, but may limit the time for such activities. Any questions not addressed in the meeting may be answered afterwards via email and will be incorporated into the minutes of the meeting for the public record. All votes will be by roll call. For public hearings, during the public testimony portion of the meeting, members of the public joining via Zoom may be recognized by using the raise hand function. If you're joining only by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. The chair reserves the right to designate a specific point of the hearing at which testimony may be offered. As in any public hearing, testimony offered must be related to the hearing being held. When all business indicated on the agenda has been completed, the members will vote to adjourn. We will start by doing a roll call. Kedem.
Here.
Zygmunt.
Here.
Kidd.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
And Stetson is here as well. So I think the first two are going to be very quick. The first one is a continued public hearing for the modification of definitive subdivision and special permit at 95 Union Street. I believe this is a request for a continuance, correct, Stephanie?
Correct.
I'll accept a motion.
Motion
To continue 95 Union Street. What is the date, please?
July 14th.
July 14th. Kevin.
That's what's in their letter.
Right.
Second, Wolf.
Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Wolf.
Aye.
Kedem.
Aye.
Zygmunt.
Aye.
Kidd.
Aye.
And Stetson's an aye as well. Next up is an A&R plan for 642 to 644 Turnpike Street. And Stephanie, am I correct? They've withdrawn this
Yes.
A&R?
So I had called the applicant and also the engineer to find out what the purpose was of the A&R plan. I know that so the project site is in mapped habitat, natural heritage and endangered species mapped habitat, and as a condition of their I'm sorry. Yeah, their permit with the Conservation Commission, they needed to preserve the area that was determined to be the species habitat. So the natural heritage determined that the project would result in a taking of habitat, and they needed to preserve the remaining area. And my understanding from talking with Jen Carlino, the environmental planner, was that it was going to be a conservation restriction held by the town. And so I was wondering why they were carving off the lot. I think they talked amongst themselves and determined, okay, if that's what was agreed to, that's fine. And they did not need the A&R plan.
So do we vote to approve the withdrawal or do we just move on?
You just move on.
Okay, well, that's what we will do then. Thank you for the explanation.
You're
All
welcome.
right, next up is 15 and 25 Robert Drive. This is the SPE 25-58340, the Davis Company's Easton Highlands LLC. I assume we have someone.
We have Matt Katz, who is with Davis Companies. And we have Steve Glowacki
Great.
and Zan just sent me the name of the last individual. They'll need to introduce themselves.
All right, welcome, Matt and Steve. Please introduce yourselves, and then the floor is yours for your presentation.
All right, good evening, Matthew Katz, with the asset manager with the Davis Companies, which is an affiliate of the ownership group for the property. And we are here today to for planning board approval for a drive-through that we believe will be a activation of a portion of the property and will enable us to lease up an upcoming vacancy.
I'm Steve Glowacki. We are the civil engineers on the site, RJ O'Connell and Associates. I represent them. We've done the civil design. I don't know if you would like me to start our presentation. I'm happy to do so when you are ready.
We are ready.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So as Matt mentioned, we're here on behalf of the applicant Easton Highlands LLC, care of the Davis Companies for site plan review based on section 25357. The project also required a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals for use, which was granted at a ZBA hearing on May 12th, 2025. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe you folks had an opportunity to see initially the proposal prior to that hearing, because I believe we received some additional comments for that. If I may share the plan set just to talk through my points. One moment, please. Is everyone seeing the plans?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. So the existing site, a breakdown of the existing site, the project you may be aware of is located at 1525 Robert Drive, collectively known as the Highlands Plaza. It's approximately 13.77 acres and is bounded by Foundry Street, which is 106 on the south side, Robert Drive to the west, Target to the north, commercial property, and then a wooded area to the east, up in the back. Property is currently occupied by an existing shopping center, including tenants Big Y and TJ Maxx, with associated surface parking, landscape areas, drainage, utility systems, and the like. Project is located within the Furnace Village District, Eastman Street subdistricts. It is outside the FEMA 100 floodplain, Aquifer Protection District, and wetland resource areas. There are currently 574 spaces on site. The proposed project includes the as Matt had mentioned initially, the installation of a drive-through, but that's to serve a proposed restaurant at the end cap of the existing shopping center. And the intent would be to convert a restaurant that was previously there, formerly Pizzoni's Pizza. As part of this proposal, we're not proposing any building changes or the like. It's only a site modification here, again, to facilitate this drive-up window. There will be some additional outdoor seating proposed, and I can get into that in a moment. The parking area to the south of the building on this side, let me jump to my next slide. where am I here? Next slide. Okay. Parking area to the south of the building will be reconfigured to accommodate a drive-through with, which can accommodate 8 vehicles rather. 3 spaces before the order board and 5 spaces after that. The reconfiguration will result ultimately in a loss of 3 parking spaces, leaving a total of 571. And there are 230 spaces required, so we are well over parked for this particular facility. Access to the drive-through will be from the southwest, access from Robert Drive, and wayfinding signage will be provided to direct vehicles into the queue. And those wayfinding signs are shown here along with these pavement markings. And the intent would be for vehicles to follow this pathway using these directional signage, signposts, and it would direct vehicles into this queue, as I mentioned, up to the order board and eventually to the pickup window. The hours of operation right now, they're anticipated to be 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Saturday, and 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Sunday. The anticipated number of employees would vary between 15 and 13, depending on the shift. In terms of vehicle service, it's really unknown at this time. There is a tenant that is that they're in the client's in negotiations with. I'm not sure if the deal's been secured yet, but we did talk about that information in the ZBA hearing being a potential smoothie shop for this area. In terms of parking, as I mentioned, there's 230 spaces required, an existing 574 with a total of 571 remaining after this reconfiguration. In terms of the technical aspects of the project, grading, drainage, and utilities, this is very simple site as this goes in terms of the existing versus the proposed. And we tried to keep the objective of utilizing the same drainage system that is currently on site. Currently, grades slope across to the east, across the shopping center down in the corner, and there are several catch basins that are down in these corners that would receive these the stormwater flows. We intend to maintain those same grading patterns, even though we are building obviously some additional open space and islands in here. And essentially the water will continue to sheet flow across the site to these catch basins where it'll be captured by these catch basins through a pipe system and continue as it drains currently today. So there are absolutely no changes proposed for that stormwater system, those stormwater systems. It is important to note with the reconfigurations of these islands, however, we are going to increase open space. And you can see we end up with quite a bit of large open areas here, which we intend to landscape, and I can get to that in a moment as well. Utility services, similar to the stormwater patterns, are going to remain as is. Again, with this being a restaurant tenant, it's already fitted, of course, with water service, gas service, sanitary service back here with grease traps in the rear and the like. So those systems, the intent is to have those remain in place as they currently are today. There is a slight change over here because of the reconfiguration that we have with the relocation of this hydrant. And we intend to show a hydrant right here on this island. Very simple relocation from this point here. Utilize the same valve in the system and just simply install a hydrant here. Site lighting is another thing that will remain the same. We did include a photometrics plan in the package. However, the site lighting isn't intended to change at all. It's again very simple maintaining of the existing pattern, the existing lighting pattern. We are fully zoning compliant on the site plan. We feel that we've sufficiently shown that on the OS1 in the zoning table, compliance for the setbacks and the like. And finally, we've submitted a narrative along with the package, and I'm not sure if you folks had a chance to read it, essentially outlining how we intend to meet the criteria for site plan approval and endorsement. I'm happy to run through those. I believe they were outlined in the memo that was circulated on June 6th. From staff report, and that also outlined those criteria and how we intend to meet those. Overall, we believe that this is a very beneficial petition for the town, again, as Matt mentioned, to sort of revitalize this corner. I think between the landscape enhancements that we plan to do at the end of the building in these large islands, and and the outdoor seating and the like, we believe it'll revitalize again this end of the shopping center and be quite an improvement for the town. That's the proposal in brief. We're happy to entertain any questions, whether from the board or the public.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think as you correctly pointed out, we have seen this before. And as you know, we supported the project and the concept with some comments. And before I turn to Stephanie, and I don't want to speak for other board members, but I think when we looked at this, Steve, I think one of the big questions in our mind was, why did you configure the entrance and the exit in the manner that you did? It seemed a little bit labored, but in my words, not the board members. So can you walk us through that process and just sort of explain your rationale in terms of the choice? And let me be maybe more specific in terms of my line of thinking. It almost seems like you're going to end up with a lot of people that have to take either a left turn or in some instances a U-turn to get into the drive-through. And then you're potentially running up against people that are going to be exiting from, after having picked up their meal. So walk us through that a little bit.
Sure. So one of the challenges we have with this site is the configuration of the end, and we're a little pinched in this corner, as you can see. And we looked at several configurations for this, in terms of how to facilitate a drive-through in this area. And one of those petitions was essentially to run the drive-through straight out this way and enter sort of straight in this pattern here. But it resulted in too short of a queue, where the queue was almost non-functional given this location. And furthermore, our concern with bringing this drive-through traffic in this direction was that should there be overflow, it would hinder this pinch point of the parking area. So although it's a rather sinuous route, we thought it important to try to bring folks around here so that should there ever be a backup, we don't foresee there would be, but if there should be, it would be out of way of the travel areas and not in this main congested area. And I thought, again, utilizing signage here, and finally the drive-through would be right here. We thought it made sense to channel folks around this direction here and lead them into the queue. That was the thought on.
I mean, I'm just looking at that and hearing your commentary. Wouldn't it solve the problem if instead of entering, I guess, from the front of the building, you enter from the back? That way the queue stays along the back. You kind of resolve the issue about the shortened queue, and then you just have people exiting maybe from that sinewy part, or maybe you can kind of tone down on that sinewy part so that it just seems a little bit easier flowing.
Sure. We did look at that, potentially coming in this direction. I think we end up with a situation, though, potentially, let's assume for a minute that vehicles are traveling in this direction along the back of the building. First of all, we're a little concerned about sending general vehicular traffic behind the building where you have loading and things like that. But you would also end up, potentially, if you had a condition where vehicles.
That's not what I'm saying at all.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So what I'm saying is you could have the same path that you've directed here, but instead of entering where you enter now, enter where the exit is identified. And that way you solve the queue issue because you're running along the back side, and then you just have people entering or exiting from the front, and maybe you can take out some of that curvature. It's just a thought. I'm sure you've thought about this already, and I certainly don't want to become engineer here.
No, that's right.
May
So
I-
the
I-
issue with, I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
would like to ask two questions. I
Plus,
see,
can we just hold 1 second, because I just want to get through this and give Stephanie a chance to provide any of her comments, and then we'll get to all the questions that you guys have.
okay,
Just give us 2 seconds here.
So the issue with coming in from this direction is that you're as the driver's side, you'd be on the wrong side of the window.
Ah,
You'd
there you
be
go.
facing here. You know, in the also the challenge with that would shorten the queue to the window where you really wouldn't have an opportunity unless you queued up in this access point. So that's the biggest challenge with trying to reverse.
You can't do it. Yeah.
And we've
Okay.
seen it before, by the way, but it's not the most optimal thing, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Stephanie? I think you're on mute, Stephanie.
So I think you've addressed this. You've said there is wayfinding signage along the way. I didn't realize and recognize that, but how far, what I didn't express, I guess, well enough in my report is, where does that wayfinding start? How are people going to know when they enter into the plaza that there is a drive-through here for this facility?
So looking at the overall site plan, you know, our thought process overall is that vehicles are going to come in this first drive. As we're, you know, a good portion of vehicles enter the drive. You know, and it's our assumption that people are going to sort of make a beeline to that tenant. And when doing so, they're going to come across this first wayfinding sign that's going to point them at it, because they'll be looking at the storefront and saying, oh, you know, I want to go down here and buy, you know, for instance, a smoothie. And they're going to come down here and they're going to see this wayfinding signage
Right.
that's going to point them in this direction.
Right.
And, you know, it's going to
Well,
change.
yeah, I understand that. So this is kind of in an obscure corner. I don't know what kind of marketing signage you're planning or expecting so that you'd catch people who aren't expecting to go to the smoothie shop. But for people who are now aware it's there and want to go there or have heard about it, is there going to be some kind of signage at the entrance from
Oh.
Rock Drive?
I'll have to ask Matt to answer that. I don't know if it's contemplated that signage would be added to, for instance, a pylon sign or the like.
Yeah,
Matt,
and I don't know if that would require a variance or not from our sign by law, but it just seems, because again, it's kind of set back in the way back. And if you have someone coming in kind of for the first time, they don't really know what the path is to that drive-through. Then you've got someone driving through that's kind of trying to figure out where they're going. And
Right.
I know when I'm driving and I'm trying to find out where I'm going, that's probably when I'm most dangerous to everybody else on the road.
Yeah, well, I think part of that is leading them, like I said, into the entry, and again, I'd ask Matt for clarification on that. But I feel like, again, once they're in that plaza heading for that area, you know, we're open to suggestions for additional signage, but I think just leading them down toward this corner, I think, you know, once they get into the plaza.
Right.
Yeah, but you
And-
are going to have some sense that the place is there, and you know, you're
Right.
aiming for it, I think. You know?
Right. And I don't know if you answered this when you started talking about the wayfinding. Is the roadway going to be marked with arrows that indicate the flow of direction?
You know,
Or is it all just these you have the signage that's going to point?
Yeah, you know, I did read your staff report. I appreciate that. And I think you had mentioned that the arrows were shown on the plan. And I do like the idea of actually calling those out as to be proposed drive-through signage. And, you know, we've seen these before where, you know, we can actually add the words drive-through underneath the arrow and enhance them. I'm in favor of adding that striping. I think it would enhance things quite a bit. And again, it would sort of emulate what we're showing here. Perhaps.
Yeah, so I think that would be helpful. And then if you could just scroll up so that we can see the drive-through loop. And forgive me if you answered this question, but you do have these 4 parking spaces there. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I figured that out. So that's where people are going to be parked if they're waiting for their order.
Well, in actuality,
That-
I saw that staff comment as well. Let me get to the right plan. This enlarged plan shows a couple of waiting spaces back here.
Right, right.
Okay.
Okay.
But these 4 spaces, they're not really earmarked for anything specific, Stephanie. The intent of these were just to simply maintain as much of the existing count as we could. You know, we're trying to offer a petition that didn't impact the parking that greatly, even though we're overparked. So we said, well, we could fit 4 more spaces in here. Perhaps we should do that, you know?
So understanding that, I would suggest that maybe you get rid of them, because where are people going to walk? And to where? I mean, really, realistically, they would only be walking to the restaurant, and that's not ideal for someone to walk across the drive-through to get into the restaurant.
I'm in favor of that. Matt, do you have any
And
commentary?
I don't think the board will disagree. I believe there's plenty of parking space over there. I know the chair has said it does get a little congested at times. But I think people would they may just end up going unused too, and I'd much rather have green space there than pavement that's not utilized.
Yeah, I think I agree, Stephanie. I think that would be, you know, again, we're so overparked that I don't see an issue with it. You know, again, I was just trying to take this
Yeah.
petition sort of with minimal impact as possible, but.
Yeah. So if you could just show again the parking spaces for the order waiting.
Sure, those are just back here.
Yeah, so this means, is there a rear exit that employees, Matt, would be able to exit and then
There is, yeah.
serve those? Okay.
Yeah, this arrow right here indicates an existing door that can be
And that
utilized for
shouldn't be too problematic, because you really have the traffic turning to the right there.
In general, yes, yep.
And then, so if you could now just scroll down a little bit to show the exit. My concern here, and I'm going to, if you don't mind, I am going to try to find the little comment thing. Or maybe might be faster if you just tools, here we go. Oh, I'm looking at your screen, not mine.
Yeah, can you mock up a share that I have?
Well, that's what I'm trying to do, but I can't see where that option is on my screen now. But
Would it
if you take your hand and you start to exit,
From here, yep.
yeah. I mean, clearly people should be going to the right here. So there's no arrow indicating that. And I feel like there should be, because you don't want them cutting across. I mean, it's kind of a weird angle there anyway. But if so they may not be looking to cut across, but I still think it might be wise to.
I think the general sense of this too is, and again, we're not talking about an extreme number of vehicles. So I think at the end of the day, if a vehicle is coming down along where, you know, currently these 4 spaces are shown, but if a vehicle is coming across here, there's really no reason why they couldn't come across here if they happen to be going to the ATM machine. Although that's probably not the best route, I would come around, but
Right, you still need to go around.
yeah. So I don't think you should necessarily. There's a reason to really restrict it, because again, I don't think we're talking about a massive flow of vehicles, and and also at some point you're going to have, you know, potentially a truck coming around the back that's going to be exiting the same route. So I think the separation of these incoming vehicles here and this maneuver leaves you some room here, you know, to sort of negate that worry, I think.
Mhm. And, you know, I'll let the board kind of weigh in on that. And then the Board of Health did have a comment that they approved with conditions. They just want to make sure the new restaurant will need to show the Board of Health the plans and any new equipment and new layout.
Yes. Yes,
And we didn't have a comment from the building department, but, you know, any kind of interior work that might need to be undertaken to accommodate the new restaurant would require a building permit.
Yes. Well, let me ask you, getting back to the Board of Health, would the process at that point in time, would during the building permit process, when if the applicant applies rather for an interior build out, Would that be the opportunity for the applicant to go to the Board of Health, or should it be done prior to that?
You know, it really depends if you feel you have something that might present a little bit of a challenge to the Board of Health or want their recommendation before you invest in a design or materials, I'd suggest going earlier. They won't sign off on the building permit or the more the CO until they're satisfied that you've met their standards and requirements.
Okay, we'll talk with the team and ensure that the potential tenant understands that, but we can talk amongst ourselves about that.
Mhm.
But I appreciate that.
And Bob, that's really all I had.
Thank-
Oh,
Thank you.
I do just want to point out that they do have, Steve mentioned that, I think you mentioned, maybe it was in the narrative, that there's additional outdoor dining. I don't know that there's outdoor dining there today, but
Right.
they have, an 8-foot span between the building and the seating, which should be adequate for any pedestrians that are coming from the west side.
Yeah, and again, this outdoor seating is really speculative. We wanted to include it so that it gave the flexibility for the tenant to use it, and it was part of our petition with the ZBA as well. The
Yeah.
configuration over here may be slightly different, but we'll at a minimum maintain that 8 feet.
Right, and again, the applicant should know that you'll need those bollards, you'll need some type of barrier for
Yes.
vehicles, so whether they plan to do it now or in the future, if those aren't installed at the time that this development or redevelopment is going on, they'll have to make accommodations for some type of barrier between the traffic and the patrons.
Yeah, agree.
And let's see, you do have the special, so we're all set. I'm sorry, I'm done.
Thank you, Stephanie. We'll get to every board member's questions, but let's start with Amos.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little about the configuration and the shape of your of call it the shape that you are proposing versus the straightforward on the side that you mentioned that you considered.
Mhm.
The first question is, I don't see a big difference on Q in between the two. It may be 1 or 2 cars, something like that. What was the difference between the straight shot, straight through versus this horseshoe shape?
Sure. This configuration here
Yeah,
is sort of
yeah.
sketched out. The difference was only 2 vehicles or so, as you pointed out, but my concern is that should vehicles back up here, they're gonna back up into this aisle. So we thought it better that if vehicles do back up over here, they're gonna back up in a position where they can back up in the, around this parking area, which will primarily be, void of vehicles for the most part, but we'll have much more queuing over here. It basically is, for lack of a better term, a safety valve, if you will. We had concepts and options right up front where we did something like this, but again, my concern was that should this queue lengthen out, it's going to block basically this sort of major point where vehicles could flow in and out around the center. That was my biggest hangup.
Yeah, and then that brings me to a second question. There is a way to modify that end of the so you get a better queue some place there on the side. So you did not find any way to avoid that conflict?
No, some of my options I looked at, again, if you start flexing, because some of the things you could look at, and this is gonna be very crude, I apologize, but if you did something like this where you,
Yeah,
where you,
exactly.
our concern was you're starting to impact the minimal parking that you have in this area over here. By the time you're done reconfiguring this, you're all but losing the last bay or even, bay and a half in this end, which serves these smaller tenants. So to us, it was a larger impact of the parking.
Yeah. Uh, Although a straight line will allow you to put a lot more parking on that side, but that's far from the tenants.
It is, yeah, it is. That's what we looked at. Yeah, the way we started this process and working with the client is our first phase of the project, if you will, was concept planning, and we threw all kinds of concepts at trying to come up with the optimal one, and this ended up being the optimal one because again, it had the movement that sort of happened outside of a lot of the action, if you will, over here, trying to avoid these maneuvers from conflicting with one another and the operations from conflicting with one another. And we landed on this. Again, not the prettiest setup, but we think it'll be effective.
So the question that follows is how critical is that queue size? You think you are going to be in a situation in which you really need all that number of cars in a queue?
Well, if you consider
That will
the
be
queue-
good business, but I don't know how it is.
if you consider the queue split in several phases, you have and you can see it here. Let me get rid of some of this sketch line work. Essentially, you have an order board right here. So you have several vehicles stacked up against the order board. When that ordering is complete, they're going to slide up into the queue while the order is being prepared, and it's sort of bisected. So if you had a shorter queue, you have shorter operations, if you will, for each of these segments, because essentially you have ordering, which would happen somewhere about here. And then you'd have, again, I'm doing this very crudely, and then you have essentially waiting and pickup. You have pickup here, and finally waiting in between the two of those. So when you start to shorten the queue, you're impacting those phases of that pickup operation. And
Okay.
a space or two could make a difference in my
Yeah, no,
opinion.
I understand. So you have a queue and a queue,
Well, more or less, yes, a double
two
queue.
queues.
That's right.
One recommendation is, you see where the number 18 is? The parking place,
This
there's
one here,
around
yes.
18, yeah. Maybe two places should have a sign for people that order online and they are waiting.
Yeah, that's not a bad move. So we have.
Because there is a lot of people waiting that they order online and they go park there and wait for the order to be ready.
Yeah, I think we haven't considered that because I'm not sure of the operations of the tenant. We have waiting spaces for folks who had ordered at the window and perhaps have a longer wait but we haven't considered parking specifically for online orders. I'm not sure how, we'd have to find out if it fit into the model of the tenant.
Just consider it.
Yeah, it's a very good idea. Yeah.
It's just a suggestion.
Yeah, it's a very good suggestion. A lot of businesses are utilizing it these days so that folks don't have to wait inside. They come in, pick up, or someone runs it out.
Yeah, all the supermarkets, Target, all of them have it.
Yes. Yep.
Is that it for you, Amos?
Yes, I'm all set. Thank you.
All right. I know,
Thank you.
Mickey, you had your hand up at one point.
I do. Some of it's kind of been answered, but I kind of still have a couple of questions. I guess I did want to follow up on one of Amos's comments though about online ordering, also thinking about DoorDash, or Grubhub or Seamless or whatever, just a place for those folks to wait. Because a lot of orders that come in online might not come in from folks, but you're going to have a queue of people looking to get in and out as quickly as possible to make their deliveries.
Yeah. I'll speak with the client and see if the prospective tenant that they have. Again, I'm not sure if that agreement's been signed, but if they have utilized, I'm assuming they utilize DoorDash. Everyone does essentially. Everyone can, I should say.
I guess my other two questions mostly revolve around the parking as well, and not the parking, but the drive-through as well. The first one is that, well, I really appreciate all of the kind of wayfinding that's going up. It's placing a lot of confidence in people following signs, and the general public tends not to. So if you have someone who comes rather than kind of looping around and they don't see it, or they come in from another part of the parking lot and just kind of go straight up to kind of make that turn, it's just, I guess my thing is that the estimate with vehicle traffic, it was what, like 260 on a Saturday and like 140 or something like that on a weekday? So
Yes.
that's like roughly 20 trips an hour or something. So you would have some cars like kind of conflicting with one another there. There's kind of a bottleneck point there.
Yeah, I could see how, I see the concern for that. If a vehicle happened to be coming down this aisle in front of, let's say, this number 18, and you had folks going this way, there could be a conflict. And my hope is that, well, I guess let me think about this. I'm not sure how I would change the directional signage. Perhaps a sign could be placed. So if people are coming from this way, they can see this sign. Perhaps we could add another sign here that should folks be coming from in front of the plaza, they see the sign that directs them into the queue here. I think that could be a potential to sort of, I know again, it's sort of contradictory to your point because you had mentioned, you're putting the onus on folks to follow directional signage, but I'm not sure that there's an easier avenue with this configuration.
Yeah, I guess it's just the configuration. Even if people do all of the following, you still have people exiting, kind of taking the right at the same time people are trying to turn in. Some of it's mitigated by the fact that if you lose those 4 spots at the top, then you also won't have people backing in and out, like at that
Agreed.
time where everybody's trying to exit and people are trying to enter, etc. It is, I would just agree with the other board members. It's I get why, but there's I don't know. It's just a little bit of a bottleneck, I guess.
Yeah, I understand it could result in that if yeah, our hope is also that, with folks utilizing this, they start to learn the maneuvers, that's the hope. They would start to understand how this works with minimal headache, but I understand the concerns. Like I said, maybe the sense is to add another sign just to sort of channel people in there to avoid this area, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, I will say complicated configurations based on space. If you've ever been to that Starbucks and Walpole on Route 1, where you kind of got to circle the building and like navigate in, I mean,
Yeah.
people learn it when they use it, so it's
I
possible.
think they do, yeah. We do quite a bit of work for Costco in their fuel facilities, and people learn, like if I'm leaving the parking lot, I go to over here, and they tend to learn it over time. And the hope is that this is, well, first of all, we don't think it's too radical of a solution, out of the gate. But again, you're right. You're putting the onus on the striping, and the signage. But I think it may be no different than you see some Dunkin' Donuts locations that you have to sort of channel around behind the building and you're not sure where to go, but you sort of use the signage as a beacon, if you will, to guide you in. So I think that I see this as a similar thing, but at least this maneuvers in the open, not necessarily behind a building.
I'm just gonna say that I might bet the first couple of weeks, at least one person figures out they can cut left and cut off that whole row of people waiting if there's a line on the queue. So
Yeah.
be prepared for that.
Right. I mean, you obviously hope that the business does well, but you also don't want to see a congestion in the line, that impacts operations. But it may end up being a good problem to have if things are successful.
I mean, did you guys, on back to questions that have been asked already, but did you guys put any thought into, kind of getting rid of the parking spaces on that side of it? Because I can see a configuration that would address all of the board members' concerns, but also preserve the important parking spaces directly in front of the tenants. But it would probably require that you get rid of all these parking spaces that are right in the middle there. I mean, I've never really noticed those parking spaces being used. Certainly the ones in front of the tenants are always used. But I just wondered if you put any thought into that.
During the holiday, maybe.
Yeah, we did. And the interesting thing that one of the things that when we first started talking about these, the applicant had said, make sure that you understand the maneuvers for service vehicles, trucks and the like. essentially, one of the sort of the hidden pieces of this is that this area, this area around the back is loading. And as vehicles exit, if we ate up this parking, there wouldn't be an easy route for them to come back around. This is more of a straight shot out of the center. If you were to apply turns or truck maneuver around here, a WB-67, which is the large semi trucks that sometimes serve the plaza, then you'd end up, putting large sweeping radii in here, that would eat up a lot of the parking as well, just to facilitate these maneuvers and try to get a truck back out into this lane. So more or less, the main issue here was to maintain that access through there. Because we thought the same thing, if you could lengthen this queue out to here, you'd get obviously much more space, much more queue, or even come out this way. There'd be a lot of other options, but it's really about maintaining this access through here as well for vehicles circling the building.
Well, I mean, you could, sure, but if you're not, I mean, it sounded like you've got like 200 extra spaces there, and I know anecdotally, those spaces right there are just never used. So, I mean, I guess if you wipe out all of those spaces, I don't know how many there are there, probably 20.
There's a 18 and 18, couple in the back, 6. Yeah, probably about 40 or so if in total, in this corner.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems like you could address all those issues. There's enough space.
There is. Yeah, I think we could look at that, but I'm not sure. I don't want to speak for the applicant. But
No, and I'm sure there's a very good I mean, there may very well be a good reason for not entertaining this. It just seems like it'd be a possible way of addressing all these concerns.
yeah, and like I said, trying to understand and maintain a parking count, again, your bylaw in terms of parking requirement is pretty low, so that's very helpful when trying to establish this. But I'm not sure how often spaces out here are used. I know, in general, I would assume that the parking is generally needed for these tenants. As you get further over to the south, yeah, these are probably less likely to be used. But I don't know what they look like, for instance, in a holiday season, and I could definitely speak with the client about that.
If you were to get rid of one complete line of parking, let's say one shot of parking, you take all that out and you gain all that area, if you will, and now and you will need to cut the end too in order to facilitate semi trailers to be able to get out. But now you have two advantages. You can do any shape, S shape, M shape, whatever, and make your queue long and have place for waiting people, and you can increase the open space as well. So there is some advantages to do that.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. And I see the point in that, we'd have to, like I said, facilitate the maneuvers around here, but you would have more open space certainly, and again, some type of configuration that could lend itself to more queuing vehicles. I definitely understand that. Like I said, I feel that this configuration, one benefit of it is, again, we're not totally impacting these maneuvers, but we still have the option of having a safety valve, if you will, in that you could have additional vehicles queuing over here should it ever get real bad, or real busy, I should say. Even if you were to, let's entertain if we got rid of those 18 spaces and you did something where you were, put some sort of type of S curve over here and made a queue that wrapped in and around like this,
Yeah, exactly.
Very crude, I apologize, but you get the picture. If you did like that, you still have the situation where there's no real overflow over here. There's no real, a valve, if you will. And now you're in a position where, again, you have to sort of facilitate vehicles moving around, or trucks moving around this outside perimeter.
Yeah.
So there's a few challenges with that, no doubt about it. We thought that this was a good compromise, again, to have a more modest drive up, but still a safety valve of sorts, to facilitate that should it be required, you know?
Yeah, I understand. By the way, I'm not very much hung up on the signs and someone getting there. I think it's confusing enough everywhere when you have a drive-through, how to get to them. Very few are very clear, and so people will drive to the wrong place. There's no way around, and there's nothing you can do. And the second time they come there, they will know. So.
Yeah, that's our feeling, you know, and I appreciate the input and the concerns and questions. It's very helpful for us to understand the overall feel. And also, you folks live in town, so you understand, you know, the items that may be specific to the shopping center. So I appreciate the feedback.
Joanne, I know you had your hand raised at one point.
Yeah, thanks. A few questions. So the traffic that goes at the back of the building, that's two-way traffic?
It has the ability to be two-way. I think generally the maneuvers all work in one direction. So in other words, I think trucks enter over here and they exit out the other side. As indicative as the location of the truck access in concrete pads, they're all facing so that a truck would pull in, back up, and then leave this direction.
Okay, sorry, your screen's skipping around a little bit, so I'm having a hard time following.
Oh, sorry, I
So
apologize.
are you saying that on the image that we're looking at now, all the trucks come in through the left side of the building and leave on the right side of the building?
Yes, but
Okay.
there is the ability for vehicles to go the other direction as well. It's just that primarily the service trucks go in the opposite
yeah.
direction.
Yeah. So if can you actually go to the landscaping plan? I think it's a
Sure.
little bit easier to look at it from there.
Sure. Oops, went too far. Can you see the
Yeah.
landscape plan?
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. Yeah. And I'm gonna see if I can, it's gonna let me. I've requested to have control of your screen for a minute, Steve. Did that pop
Oh,
up?
yes, sure, there we go.
Okay, can you see my cursor going in a circle?
No, let me look. Oh, yes, now I can, yes.
You can. Okay, super.
Mhm.
This is kind of fancy. I like this.
It's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah. So if trucks are coming out this way, if there is going to be an overflow coming out of here at any point, what's to prevent there not being a bottleneck here? Are you intending to put some like striping on the ground for do not block or something like that?
You know, I think in general, I think it would really be up to vehicles to sort of police themselves. It's not really customary to put a do not block the box inside, you know, in shopping areas like this. It's really done with vehicles stopping there, understanding someone's trying to pass by. And I know it's basically sounds like I'm saying it's the honor system. And as we know, drivers don't always abide by the honor system. But we think that is a practical thing where vehicles are going to stop at that end island to not block that area. If they see a vehicle coming down trying to pass, they're going to either back up or as they move forward, the vehicle behind them is not going to move.
Oh,
That's
true.
the thought process, you know.
Mm-hmm. And then I've been to a lot of these drive-throughs where it is really complicated to get to the window. And in particular, I'm thinking of Chick-fil-A at Westgate Mall in Brockton.
Oh, yeah,
You have to go
we did that.
through the parking lot to kind of access it. Yep, you. And it backs up, especially during like the opening, but at lunchtime, it does back up quite a bit into the parking areas. And
Yes.
I've been unlucky enough to be in one of those parking areas when there's a line and then try to get out. And I'm kind of stuck for like a good while until somebody manages to move up and move back enough for me to fit in. So I think, you know, what some of the other board members were saying about eliminating some of these parking spaces with that in mind might actually be pretty helpful, like especially up here, if it does back up and maybe just even if just a few of these here. And that way, if it does back up, at least they're not blocking anybody in there if it is full. And then my other comment was just about sort of understanding that right now this parking isn't utilized much. It could be in the future. Tenants change all the time, right? You don't know who's going to be there. How are folks who do park in this area actually going to cross over to the restaurant. There's no kind of natural walking path, if you will. And kind of one thought on that is if you eliminated some of these in the first row, then you could also create like a funnel for people to walk over and then do kind of like a crosswalk through here or something
Across it.
somehow.
Yeah, it's true. We don't have easy access. The intent would be that people would walk around the island, but again, people move like water. The path of least resistance at times. We could consider a crossing there of sorts, something that would take folks across, and maybe at the expense of a couple of spaces, striping sort of.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful because it's an awkward thing. This whole thing, as everybody's kind of said, it looks pretty reasonable to me compared to other places that I've been to through drive-through that are just kind of awkward and wild. But my biggest concern really is just with the safety aspect, particularly for big trucks getting stuck, and also just people crossing if they do happen to park in any of those spots, really. Because if there's also, there might be an ATM queue, so then you've got your, your restaurant queue, and then yeah, there's lots of jamming that could happen, and pedestrians often, are the most vulnerable, obviously, in those kind of situations.
Yeah, agree.
And that's it for me.
Thank you very much.
Kathy, any thoughts?
I apologize. I do have to be quite honest, Steve. A lot of the movement that you were doing, scrolling in, scrolling out, and zooming was really difficult for me to stay focused.
Oh, sorry.
And in fact, it made I get motion sick very easily. So I had a tough time staying focused on that. But I think everyone is focused on the same questions and concerns that I have had, and that's it just seems like it's going to be complicated to navigate the way this is designed right now.
Yeah, I know. I understand the concerns. Like I said, it's not the praise configuration, but I think ultimately they'll get you where you're going. In terms of signage and striping. I think that over time this will be a learned condition. Definitely understand the concerns. For instance, as was discussed earlier, the Chick-fil-A's can be a really tough configuration. We don't anticipate this smoothie shop, for instance, having that kind of impact. But I do appreciate the input. And the hope is that the signage would work. The signage and the landscaping as well would help, direct people a little bit. You can see it's a cleaner look on this plan with the raised islands and things like that as well. But I understand the concerns.
I think signage is very important here, and you should consider maybe investing a little more in signage so it is clear for the people coming through where to go and how to do it. More than usual.
Sure. I agree. Like I said, I think it may be beneficial to put a sign coming from the other direction as well. So just so folks understand, given the concerns you're sharing here, that they'd be able to channel in and around that parking area with a little bit more enhanced understanding of what's going on. In addition to a pedestrian crossing over there, might break up that area a little bit and then offer a raised island, for instance, would offer an area for another wayfinding sign.
I don't know, you want to put a signage for the tracks to tell them that there is a drive-through at the end.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know if do I have control again? If you could see my hand moving around.
Yeah, you do.
So right there, you can put a sign for the tracks.
Yeah, I think what you'd have is perhaps like a vehicle entering sign, so people are cognizant of that corner. It is a tight corner. Yeah, let me make note of that.
I don't know, you might want to put a stop sign there.
We could, just it may be tough to see, but there is obviously a proposed stop bar coming out of the facility, so vehicles are going to have a chance to stop here and have visibility.
I would put a stop sign for the other direction coming from the back of the building.
Yeah, like right here.
Yes.
Okay. Okay,
All right, so other than signage, removing those 4 spaces in the back and some of the striping that we've discussed, are we looking for anything else here, board members? Hearing no comments, I will take that as a no. So, Steve, I think it sounds to me like your responses on most of the substantive issues on the design resonated with folks here. But that, some modest improvements with signage, removing those 4 spaces and adding the permanent striping, sort of as you had described before with labeling drive-through and that would probably be acceptable here, if I'm reading the room correctly. So is that something that you think you might be able to get done by the next meeting, or, I mean, you tell us.
oh, sure, yeah, I think it's a very quick turnaround to add these, reflect these few changes on the plans and send back a set. When is the next hearing? I get my calendar.
June 23rd.
June 23rd.
June 23rd. Yeah, that's certainly not a problem. We can have them back, in maybe perhaps a week. We'll obviously confer with the applicant and go over these, in my opinion, very minor changes.
Great. Well, with that being said, do I have a motion?
Is a motion to continue?
Yes.
Motion to continue to June 23rd, Kevin.
Zygmunt, second.
Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Zygmunt?
Aye.
Kidd?
Aye.
Kedem? Kedem?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
And Stetson's an aye as well. We'll see you at the next meeting. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Thank you.
You as well. Okay, next up is meeting minutes. Any thoughts, comments, edits, revisions?
All good, Kevin.
Take that as a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Wolf.
Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Kedem?
Aye.
Zygmunt?
Aye.
Kidd?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
And Stetson's an aye as well. Okay, Stephanie, we've got representative appointment time here.
Yes, so the first one is for the CPA committee. And currently Amos is the representative to that board.
Amos, are you still passionate about that committee?
Yeah, I really like it.
Any
But
motions?
if someone else wants to step in, we can have a ballot.
Do we have any challengers? Seeing none, how about a motion?
Motion to reappoint Amos to the CPA committee.
Second, Wolf.
Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Zygmunt?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Kidd?
Aye.
Kedem?
Well, I don't know, can I vote? Aye.
Yes.
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
And that's a yes, and Stetson's an aye as well. All right, congratulations. All right, next up is
You bet.
capital planning. I've been doing this for the past couple of years. It's a light lift. I'm more than happy to pass the baton. But I'll do it again too. So whatever anybody wants to do here is fine by me.
Motion to nominate Bob back to the capital planning committee.
Kevin,
Zygmunt,
second.
second.
Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Kedem?
Aye.
Kidd?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Zygmunt?
Aye.
and Stetson's and I as well. Last but certainly not least is Committee for Climate Action Planning. And I believe that's Joanne, right, Stephanie?
No, I think it's
No, I
Mickey.
think it's
Oh,
Kathy.
I'm
it's
sorry.
Kathy.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I'm
Oops.
sorry. So
You
Kathy, how do you
notice I
feel about it?
hesitated there because I was thinking Joanne, but then I'm like, no, it's Kathy.
Nope, that's been me.
Yeah.
We're in a pause. You know, they were waiting to get through the override
Ace. Yeah.
time. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy to stick around, and we're hopefully gonna be picking it back up again
Yeah.
later this summer.
Motion to nominate for the climate committee. Kevin.
Second, Joanne?
Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Kedem.
Aye.
Zygmunt.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Kid.
Aye.
And Stetson's and I as well. No real chair updates this week. It's a pretty light week. But I know our planning director wants to talk about zoning meetings.
Well, I just wanted to let people know I'm expecting to hear back. I've made some calls out, and hopefully this week we can get some meetings on the calendar.
Excellent. I like the short and sweet updates. Wonderful. Well, with that being said, this meeting, I think that's all the business for this meeting. Do I have one final motion?
Motion to adjourn. Wolf.
Second, Kid.
Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Wolf.
Aye.
Zygmunt.
Aye.
Kid.
Aye.
Kedem.
Aye.
Stetson's and I as well. Amos, with your famous sign off.
Yeah. Okay. Good night and good luck.
Everyone have a great
Good night,
week.
everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.